One of the things that I talk about fairly often is the concept of fear, and sometimes how we as believers try to outrun fear or ignore fear and deny it because somehow it seems to mean that we don't have enough faith. I don't believe that's necessarily true. I think that there are aspects where our faith is being challenged and can be shaped while we're feeling fear, but it's important to understand why fear is there, where it began, because we could have fearful responses in all kinds of areas of our lives. One, we may not even know that the fear is present. And two, the fear may be tied to experiences from the past with someone that's been very painful and we haven't received healing for it. So when we notice the fear is there, rather than trying to simply say, don't fear, just don't do it, just don't, because God says do not fear. And that's true. And there's actually great hope and there's great conviction and challenge and encouragement in that phrase, do not fear. My thoughts about when we tend to say that, though, is that sometimes we're actually motivated by fear in telling ourselves or other people not to fear. Let me try to explain that just a little bit. So the verses in Scripture, when it says do not fear, it's interesting to note, I think particularly it's in the book of Joshua, there's several times when the command is given. It's not a demand, it's a command, which means it's prescriptive. God is saying, do not fear, for I am with you. Repeatedly over and over. And I'm not saying that in every reference, but it's interesting to look up those scriptures and examine how the do not fear phrases are used in Scripture. They're meant to be an encouragement and a challenge for our spirit to trust God, to seek Him first, to lean on Him and the ways that He's providing for us, which may not be the ways that we think He should provide for us. Sometimes that means stilling our bodies and our minds and everything while God does something. Sometimes it means taking really scary steps and using our voice more than we want to or more than we feel like we should, especially if we felt like our voice isn't as valued as other people. Sometimes it means using less of our voice because we think that everybody has to hear what we have to say. But in do not fear, God's presence with us. I mean, think about that, the beauty of the command of that. He's saying, you don't have to fear because I'm with you. You're not alone. You're not going to be overcome by everything that's happened to you. Even if this challenge is really hard and it feels overwhelming to face and to deal with, you won't be alone in facing it because God is with you. So there are times when we're trying to tell ourselves, do not fear, because we're motivated that if we don't automatically stop fearing, if we can't obey it as a command and say, obey the command and say, no fear, it's completely done with, I 100% am able to receive it and act on it, let me rephrase that. If we think of this as we can't fear because we're not allowed to fear, because God tells us not to fear, so therefore, if we have any fear, we've failed and we don't have enough faith. There's a fear motivation underneath that. How about if we looked at it as do not fear because something that's motivated by God's love and receiving God's love for us. You don't have to be ruled by fear right now. Don't let that take you over because I'm providing for you in this way, or because I'm speaking to your heart in some way. It could be a little word, or it could be encouragement to take this step, or it could be reassurance to help you get through those moments or whatever, but something that's motivated out of love. And in turn, when we meet other people who are feeling anxious and they're experiencing fear and they acknowledge their fear to us, sometimes we can feel this burden to say, well, don't fear, because God's with you. And so the same concept that I'm talking about becomes words that are used out of a motivation that's still driven by fear. Because we aren't comfortable dealing with another person's anxiety. We feel better when everything is calm and worked out and there's no tension and there's no just the anxiety or the fear or even anger or sadness. It can be really challenging to see those emotions in others or deal with them ourselves. But when love is the motivating factor, we are present with that person in a way that cares about their concerns, validates their experiences, and helps them to actually internalize and incorporate the courage that they need to not be overcome by fear, to take steps through the fear so that they can experience more of what God is calling them to do or to experience with Him. I hope that's been helpful. For more topics on fear and faith, go ahead and follow me on the blog at it's not a cultivated life. It's my name, JoleneUnderwood.com, and other videos. I have a lot of links for the ones that I've done here on the iBelieve community and elsewhere. The concept of do not fear, just keep in mind, the motivation is love, not fear.